Over to you.
Thank you. Who here has ever heard of WikiTree.com? Handful of people. It's like Wikipedia for genealogists. Have you all heard of Wikipedia? A collaborative encyclopedia which has put Encyclopedia Britannia and all those things out of business. You will see as I go through some of the examples later on, the reasons why I think WikiTree is going to put some of the legacy genealogy websites out of business. But I'm just going to talk about one of its features tonight, which are one-name studies. And I started a couple of years ago with a friend of mine called Jerry Cahirs, who's desperate to learn the history of the Cahirs surname. It's a very rare surname. It's very easy to run a Cahirs one-name study because there's only a handful of them. I got roped in some time ago to the OD clan. I do have an OD great-great-great-great-grandmother. I do have a Kennedy great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, I think. Very long way back. I was at the O'Malley gathering with Don and Dennis and a few others a couple of weeks ago with my good friend Maurice Gleeson, helping to answer the DNA questions. And we both ended the weekend desperate to find O'Malley ancestors because we don't have O'Malley ancestors. But families don't have to be related to you to be interesting. So when Mark and Tom asked me a couple of weeks ago if I'd say a few words, I had a chat with Mark and decided maybe I'd say a little bit about how I use WikiTree for genealogy and for DNA. And I looked at the Kennedy one-name study, and it hadn't been touched for 4.5 years. But WikiTree is a collaborative website, and there's an honor code, which I'll show you in a minute. And anybody who signs the honor code can edit anything that is open or public, including this Kennedy name study. There's lots of little hieroglyphics on these pages. It looks blurred to me from this angle. Is it clear to everyone down the back? Yeah? That little white circle with the open lock means this is an open page which anyone who signs the WikiTree honor code can edit. But it is polite because pages have profile managers. So the managers of this one are the one-name studies overlords in WikiTree and Erin Kennedy Doc. So I wrote to her a week, 10 days ago and said, do you mind if I update the Kennedy name study? And I hadn't heard back as of yesterday morning. And I said, okay, I'll just update it anyway. I've given her a week's notice that I'm going to do that. I hope she doesn't mind. So every name study has one page with links to lots of other WikiTree features. At the top of the page, we have a table of contents. Those are the sections that I created for the Cahirs study and the OD study. Slightly altered. I said I'll try and do something similar for the WikiTree study. So I'm going to just scroll down through the page and show you some of the nice features. There's lots of blanks. I want other people to volunteer to be WikiTreeers, to sign up, to sign the honor code, and to start editing and helping. And I'm sure even a handful of people in the room do that, my job tonight will have been successful. The introductory paragraph is the same for every name study. It says who started it, when it started. It's a collaborative platform to collect information on the surname, O'Canada or Kennedy in this case. These name studies are particularly suited to Y-DNA studies because, as Mark has been telling us, the Y-DNA follows from father to son like the surname. So the group of people with the same surname have the same Y chromosome. In theory, as Mark also said, in practice, there are multiple different origins of the Kennedy surname and multiple different Y-DNA signatures. If you want to join, I will get Tom maybe to send out the link to the page in an email to the mailing list in due course, or you might want to photograph the screen or just photograph the address in the address bar, wikitree.com/wiki. You don't even need to do that. You just go to the WikiTree homepage and you type in the search bar, last name Kennedy, and it'll give you a list of all the 32,668 Kennedy profiles on WikiTree. And over there on the right-hand side, there will be a link to the Kennedy project. If there wasn't a Kennedy project, there'd be a link over there saying, click here to start the OD project or the Waldron project or the Berkeley project or whatever project doesn't yet exist. So that link brings you to the page that we started with. So we only need one copy of it open. And we don't need that one open, and we'll come back to that one later. There's a very simple sign-up form, and I'd better open it in a private window to show you what it looks like when you want to sign up. All at once is your first name, your last name at birth. Everyone who joins WikiTree gets a WikiTree ID or identifier. It is your last name at birth, hyphen, and a number. So I'm Waldron, hyphen, 201, because I was the 201st Waldron added to WikiTree. And then you just pick a password and give your email address, and there are age criteria, and you have to prove you're not a robot. So it's easy to sign up. The honor code is the important bit. If you want to collaborate, there have to be principles. Step one, we collaborate because we all have the same ancestries. Everyone in this room is descended from the same Kennedys who lived in Tipperary 300 years ago. We all care about accuracy. Don't think anyone's going to object to that. We know sometimes people make mistakes. We assume they're unintentional and ask for understanding if we make mistakes. We try to be courteous to everyone. We respect privacy. I showed you the white open lock. You have some profiles of living people and recently deceased people where they're locked, and only the person who created the profile and the people they add to the trusted list can change them. We respect copyrights, as you do in anything. We give credit, and we cite our sources, which is critically important. And we're in a mission to keep information as free and open as possible. Anybody got any objections to any of that? No, sounds reasonable. So once Erin is still the name study coordinator, so she has agreed to assist anyone who sends in questions. I put my name and Mark's name further down for DNA questions as well. Says that any one name study should start with the surname history. We're all familiar with that, I think, in this room. I went to Wolf, which is available online. Two of the greatest Irish surname dictionaries are by two completely different men who happen to have the same surname, Wolf. Father Wolf published his in 1923, I think. When you write these pages, you can add footnotes or endnotes. So I've forgotten what year Reverend Wolf wrote his book, 1923. So you just click on the link, it jumps down to the endnote. You can go back up again. Edward MacLysaght was the head of the genealogical office in Dublin for many years. And he published many books on Irish surnames. So that's his description of the history of the Kennedys. You notice Wolfe in 1923 did not mention John Fitzgerald Kennedy. MacLysaght in what year was MacLysaght? Jump to our sources. 1985 did mention JFK, and De Wolfe in 2002 did mention JFK. So we could put a lot more history in there. I hadn't time in the last 2 days to do that. I said, let's look at how common the surname is in Ireland. I know there are Scottish Kennedys as well. We could add sections on the Scottish Kennedys to this page. In 1911, we had 17,579 Kennedys with that spelling enumerated in the Irish census. Those of you who are not living in Ireland may not have been part of the hoopla on the 18th of April, the 100th anniversary of the first census to take place in the Irish Free State after independence. The law changed after 1926 and imposed a 100-year closure rule. Genealogists like me campaigned for years to get the results of the 1926 census released. As the late, great Charlie Haughey, some people think he's not great. He did a lot of good things. telling Mark he's just reached free travel age. That's another Charlie Haughey innovation. But Charlie was a parliamentary secretary back in the early 60s and decided the 1901 and 1911 censuses would be made available in the Public Record Office, as it was still called at the time. So that happened in 1961. We had to wait 65 years to get our hands on new census returns. So we were like, all Irish genealogists were like children on Christmas morning at midnight on the 18th of April. And the whole staff of the National Archives was at work at midnight, fingers crossed, hoping it would all work. And it worked reasonably smoothly. They told us we'd be able to search by all the fields, and we thought that meant it a minute past midnight, but they're rolling it out slowly. And I should also plug, we have a conference coming up in Kilrush on the 9th to the 11th of October, where you can hear all about the 1926 census and the process of releasing it. What happened to the Kennedys between 1911 and 1926? We lost over 4,000. Some of that was because the 1926 census was the first one after partition. It only covered 26 counties. The 1911 census had covered all 32 counties. Some of it was because, I'm just looking at the English language spelling. When I was lobbying, I met Eamon O'Keefe when he was the relevant minister. That's how long ago the lobbying was started. And in being a good Gaeilgeoir, I said, I'm sure in the 1920s, at the height of the Gaelic revival and after independence and the rising and so on, I said, I bet a third of the country filled in their census forms in Irish. That was the biggest shock we got in April. Only about 5% were filled in Irish. And even in the Gaeltacht areas, they were mostly filled in English, because the people who spoke Irish were probably, even in the 1920s, not literate in either language, and the civic guard, the policeman, who was the enumerator, wrote down the form in English. And we had a great success at the O'Malley gathering, where a family came over from Birmingham looking for their ancestor who was born in the Bethany Mother and Baby Home in Dublin. And all they knew was that his mother was from Burtonport in the Donegal Gaeltacht. And I found her. I tried to find her on my mobile phone when I was talking to them, and the screen is very small. And I saw this woman aged 40 with the right name in the right place. And I said, she couldn't still be having children 14 years later. When I got home and I looked at it on the big screen, I saw she was the granddaughter of the head of household. And I said, I'm not going to have a 40-year-old living with her grandparents. So I looked at the original form, and she was 10. And the handwriting recognition software had misread the age. And it's understandable, because the civil servants wrote over the ages in green ink when they were collecting aggregate data. So it turned out that was the lady we were looking for. And we found her as O'Malley, even though she was in the Gaeltacht, and even though she was probably known as O'Malia. And it turned out her father was known as Melaugh, M-E-L-A-U-G-H, a very rare name, only found around Strabane and Derry. So that was probably when she went to when he settled in the Gaeltacht, having been in the British Army, translated as O'Malia, and then translated back by the Guard in 1926 to O'Malley, and that's what stuck, and these people are still O'Malleys living in England today. So that's a way of this relevant subject for tonight. I did say a week ago, I wonder how many Kennedys from the 1926 census I could make WikiTree profiles for. So let me show you what an individual WikiTree profile looks like. This is a more advanced search, and it can only find 2 profiles for Kennedy so far, which have some connection to the 1926 census. But it's only 3 months in, and not everybody puts on all these detailed category information. But I will look at, I did make one profile today to show you what a profile looks like. So let me find my recent contributions to WikiTree. And where is Mary Ann Kennedy? I looked at Kilrush because we're having this conference in Kilrush. I'm the PRO of the Local History Society in Kilrush. There were only 4 Kennedys in Kilrush in the 1926 census, and one of them was a nun, and she was born in Templederry. So I sent Tom an email, said, or Mark, do you know who this lady is? And Tom said, yes, she's my great aunt. So her name and religion was Sister Mary de Sales. So up at the top, it shows the official name. Down here, it shows the name by which she was known, the preferred name. And then there's space for a pedigree chart. I didn't have time to fill in her parents. Down here, there would be prompts for spouse or children if she wasn't a nun. I clicked no spouse, no children. And then I put her in the category for the 1926 census of Kilrush. There were some wonderful browser extensions that you can use to copy the information from the census website into the WikiTree biography. So in 2 clicks with a browser extension, I was able to produce this table containing all the nuns, or at least the nuns in the convent, on the same page as Sister Kennedy in the census. Sadly, the Convent of Mercy in Kilrush has gone derelict. The nuns have moved into a new, smaller, modern convent, and in 20-25 years, the whole building is derelict. You can't get into the nuns' burial ground anymore. But members of our History Society went in there about 10 years ago, and I was even able to find a photograph of Sister de Sales's tombstone, and I also put a link into her death record. And down at the bottom, again, in 2 clicks with a browser extension, you can put in a link to an ancestry profile. So there she is on Mark's ancestry tree as well. So it's very neatly integrated with all the sites with genealogical source information, with the other family tree hosting websites, and with the DNA websites, which we'll come to later. So let's go back and see what else would you put on a surname one name study. Notable bearers of the surname, there are loads. WikiTree has its own notables category, but I said let's just put in a link to all the famous Kennedys listed on Wikipedia, and there are loads. So I don't know how many of those have WikiTree profiles. Actually, I do have some idea, because that little white square that you can barely see there is an indicator from another browser extension saying this person on Wikipedia also has a pedigree on WikiTree, but he's living, so his profile is locked. We can't do anything about it. But it is linked. If you were on the trusted list, you would see the link back to Wikipedia. There are notable Kennedys with WikiTree profiles. Again, this is the more advanced WikiTree Plus search. There are 99 famous Kennedys who already have profiles and pedigrees on WikiTree, not surprisingly starting with John F. Kennedy. Caroline living, his daughter, I suppose, Ted. The Earls of Cassilis, Scottish Kennedys, John Fitzgerald Jr., Joseph Patrick, 100 more of them. Surname variants are something that should be part of any one name study. That's a handful of them. I looked at the DNA projects later. There are more to be added to that list. A discussion of why DNA is something else that should be part of it. This is basically the stuff that Mark has told us about earlier. And we know that there are a large cluster of Kennedys with Dalkashian Y-DNA. So we can see that from FamilyTreeDNA. This is the group time tree for just one group, for just the Dalkashian Kennedys on FamilyTreeDNA. Each of these DC mutations is a Dalkashian mutation on the Y chromosome. DC stands for Talgash. That's only been found in a handful of men in most cases. And FamilyTreeDNA gives us approximate dates, and the dashed line is the range of possible dates. So for example, here we have the two descendants of Long Andrew Kennedy, one of whom is presumably Mark. And they share this FT126220 mutation, which is dated to sometime about 1900. And the previous mutation that some ancestor had was DC709, which is common to a very large number of Kennedys. So you can put links from WikiTree to FamilyTreeDNA, but they're also linked in other ways. If we go to Mark's profile, I hope he doesn't mind me showing the details. On every profile, you can state what DNA tests you have taken. Mark has taken the Y-DNA test, the mitochondrial test, and the autosomal test. And you can click on the WikiTree link to Mark's most recent Y-DNA mutation, and it takes you back to the FamilyTreeDNA page with the estimate of the age of that mutation, circa 1850, and the older mutations which preceded it in the Kennedy male line descent. And because Mark has added his Y-DNA information, it propagates to all his relatives on WikiTree automatically. So here's Hugh of Glen Crow, the progenitor of Mark's family of Kennedys. And he has 3 relatives who are relevant for DNA purposes. So if you're descended from Hugh, you will see you should have maybe not the FT126220 mutation, because that's only about 150 years old and Hugh lived 300 years ago. But when you click through to that, you will see DC709 is older, and all Hugh's descendants are going to have the older DC709 mutation. You also see Tom Ryan and Mark are close enough to share autosomal DNA with Hugh. It would show anybody within a 7-degree or a third cousin relationship as likely to share autosomal DNA. I tidied up Hugh's pedigree this morning. I added some research notes, but Mark talked earlier about how Hugh gets confused with another Hugh Kennedy, or at least how the wife that you see on lots of ancestry trees for Hugh is not necessarily the correct wife, because they married in 1726 in Scotland. And we've no evidence to show that the man who married in 1726 in Scotland and the man who died in 1766 in Tipperary are the same person. And we can put research notes, and we even just have to mouse over it, but I can jump down because I put in a link. How many user-donated ancestry trees have Long Andrew Kennedy in them? 899, no less. So hopefully that will load up. 899 different trees, with Long Andrew with a birth year estimated as 1736 or thereabouts. There are some with a much later birth year and some with a much earlier birth year, and they're not even counted in the 899. And the first one has Jean Hewison, second one has Jean Hewison, third one, the mother is private, the fourth one has Jean Howison. All of them have the Scottish mother. Mark assures me he has been looking for years. He has found no source to show that they came from Scotland to Tipperary, that they're 2 different people. But rather than have to correct 899 individual ancestry users on WikiTree, you just put the easily confused template on the profile and put in a little research note, and that deters anyone else who doesn't have the source information from coming in and adding the wrong mother. Everyone here, I presume, knows that Brian Boru was the son of Kinetic MacLurcon, lived in Killaloe, where I live. We were very lucky that Conor Miles John O'Brien, the 18th Baron in Chiquin, was one of the very early adopters of genetic genealogy. He ran the O'Brien clan, just like Tom and the others here run the Kennedy clan. And he was one of the first people that sent off his DNA to FamilyTreeDNA for analysis. So on his profile, Since he died, because I knew him and met him at genetic genealogy conferences, I was able to add the details of his DNA tests. His most recent confirmed mutation is FGC 13418, and that, you're probably not going to remember this, but ZZ341, that is a mutation common to all the Dalcassian Kennedys and all the Dalcassian O'Briens. And these 6 more recent mutations probably all took place in men who already had the surname O'Brien, just like the DC709 that I looked at earlier took place in one of the very early Kennedys about 800 years ago. So if we go to Brian Boru's profile or Kinetic McLurkin's profile, and we look at the DNA connections there, the Y-DNA information for Connor has propagated 32 generations up the tree to Kinetic McLurkin. So it tells us that his descendant has the FGC 13418 mutation. Then you look at FamilyTreeDNA to see, did Brian Boru or Kinetic have that mutation, or is it something that has occurred in one of their more recent descendants? And you look back and see what were the mutations that occurred before 1014. They're the ones that Brian Boru had, not necessarily the more recent ones. So it's all nicely integrated back and forth. Then we can have a list of the project members. There were a couple there already. I added Mark and myself. There are 11,259 end-of-line Kennedy ancestors on WikiTree. And here we have a lovely tool, the One Name Trees app. So because there are so many, I've told it, just show me all the Kennedys with birthplace Ireland that have profiles on WikiTree. The earliest is a Donegal Kennedy, born about 1130. They're in order of birth year. The number in the left-hand column is how many Kennedy descendants they have on WikiTree. So Donegal has 1 daughter who married an O'Brien. That was the end of the surname. The next ones have no Kennedy descendants on WikiTree. Obviously, the married women aren't going to have Kennedy children. They're going to have Stewart children and McCulloch children. There's various icons to tell us what's good or bad. That little torch icon says we need to go and search with our torch for sources. That profile has no good sources on it. So if I jump down to our Hugh of Glen Crow again, this data updates once a week. I only changed his birth year to 1696 this morning. It previously was before 1716. He has 27 Kennedy descendants on WikiTree. He has autosomal descendants with autosomal DNA information and descendants with Y-DNA information. His contemporary Patrick Kennedy also has descendants with Y-DNA information. You can click the plus to expand the descendants. Long Andrew is the only son, and he has 26 descendants. But if we look at Patrick's Y-DNA information, we have to go to Patrick's profile and go to the DNA section and go to his descendant Michael's most recent mutation. And we recognize back up here, L226 is the Dalcassian mutation, which all the O'Briens and all the Kennedys and all the other Dalcassian surnames have. The other famous Irish Y-DNA mutation from the same time period, M222, is known as the Nile of the Nine Hostages mutation. Lots of people from the northwest of Ireland have this Y chromosome mutation. So the geneticist talked to the historians and said, is there any figure in Irish history about 1500 years ago who's likely to have lots of male line descendants, including O'Neills and O'Donnells and various northwestern names? And the man on the borderline between the mythology and the oral pedigrees and the written pedigrees was Niall of the Nine Hostages. Yeah.
L226 mutation manifest itself?
How does it manifest itself? It's just one location on the Y chromosome where there are 4 letters A, C, G, and T representing the 4 chemical bases that make up all our chromosomes. I don't even know, was it an A or a C or a G or a T changed to one of the other letters? So there's no physical or health implications of it, as far as I know anyway. Mark might correct me. Most of these mutations have no discernible effect except that they are inherited and they're picked up in the DNA analysis in the laboratory.
Hemochromatosis, which I'm told is very much a Celtic inherited problem with Ireland.
And the Y chromosome is only one of 23 pairs of chromosomes.
Yeah.
So the gene for hemochromatosis, I don't know what chromosome it's on, but it's more likely to be on one of the autosomal chromosomes than on the Y chromosome. Women get hemochromatosis. So it's presumably not caused by any mutation on the Y chromosome because women don't have a Y chromosome.
Any other questions from anybody?
You get the 1036 date. Is that just, you don't have his DNA, so how do you get it if you can only go back 6 weeks? How do you get that?
The Y chromosome mutations are inherited from father to son through dozens of generations.
So you're just going connecting that name to some written document.
Yeah, in the case of the Lord Inchiquin, his pedigree is well documented back through the Barons Inchiquin and the Earls of Thomond and the Kings of Thomond. So there is a lot of written theory, and at one stage in the early 1800s, I think it was the Inchiquin title became, but Lord Inchiquin died and he had no immediate heirs, and there was a succession case that ran on for probably decades, and eventually I think the title went to an 8th cousin or something, another son of the very first man who'd had the title about 300 years earlier. So that pedigree is well written, but he was taking a big risk because they say there's roughly a 2% chance of an NPE and not the parent expected at each generation. So over 30 generations, there's certainly 50% chance probably that he wasn't a descendant of Brian Boru, but all the other matches worked very well. His closest Y-DNA matches, I think, were in Tasmania, formerly Van Diemen's Land, where his close relative, William Smith O'Brien, was transported after the 1848 rebellion. And turned out that even though he had one family at home, he had another family when he was in Van Diemen's Land. And I said I'm involved in the OD clan. And when we started getting OD Y-DNA results, we were surprised to find about half the ODs had close Y-DNA matches with Lord Inchiquin, the O'Briens. And Shane O'D, the current or recent chieftain of the clan, said, oh, we always heard growing up that the ODs and the O'Briens fostered each other's children in County Clare. And they fought side by side at the Battle of Dysart O'D in 1318. And I went to a talk on Bishop Cornelius O'D a few months ago. The lady who gave that talk independently, without knowing anything about my DNA project, said the ODs and the O'Briens fostered each other's children. So at some point, an O'Brien child was fostered by the ODs, grew up with the OD surname. So now half the ODs are the royal ODs, descended from the High King, Brian Boru, and the other half of the ODs are the real ODs who've been ODs for centuries longer. But they're both part of the Dalcashian dynasty. So I'm supposed to talk for half an hour. Is there anything else on here that I want to say? Oh, yes. I did bring my medal because I said I'd say a little bit about the other organizations that run surname studies and surname groups. There's the Guild of One Name Studies run out of London. And as part of that, there is a Kennedy One Name Study. Are people familiar with this one? No? Yeah, Ori knows about it. So I'm not even sure the name is there. Ian Kennedy, I think, is the man who runs it. And there is some DNA information, didn't look at it very closely. Talked about Y-DNA. Put in a plug for this gathering so that on WikiTree they talk about cousin bait, I say, when you create a profile, a good profile about an interesting ancestor, share it on your social media, and that will be cousin bait. But it works the other way too. If you're running a gathering, put it up on WikiTree, and it will be bait for cousins to come to the next gathering.
Anne-Marie Kennedy over there for creating that lovely poster for us.
Well done. Which is Anne-Marie? Who? Beside you. Oh, you're beside Helen. So I put links to the letter. There isn't a sign-up form for the newsletter. I just go into the archives and find the contact details at the bottom and send a message. I put a link to the video I found of Rhodey being inaugurated. We could have another list of chieftains. There is a FamilyTreeDNA project. I put in the details of the GEDmatch project, which hopefully will drive more people to Mark and the GEDmatch project, a link to the associated Facebook group. The ultimate objective, why we want to collaborate on the family tree. We want to add all the Kennedy families not previously represented. That will increase the number of people on the One Name Tree page, which I showed you. But we also want to find the common ancestors between all these many end-of-line ancestors that are already on WikiTree and tie them all together. Then I put in a section for solving puzzles. If you have any Kennedy puzzles, that's a good place to put it in. And then you can link to the WikiTree profiles to explain what's going on. Clans of Ireland is something else that I discovered when I looked at the Clans of Ireland website. There is a list of surnames. Register clans is on a different page. That's the link to the home page. And I thought I'd find the Irish Kennedy Heritage Group, but apparently not. Here's the list. That will get us to it. The O'Malley's are part of it, aren't they? And the O'Dees are part of it. And they give out nice medals to people they like. And they give you lots of publicity and advice on organizing gatherings and inaugurating chieftains and whatever. So it's something that I think the Kennedys should have a talk about. So that's all I have time to say in about half an hour.